Okay, so yesterday I mentioned that there was a story behind the birth of Agnes. A couple of you have actually asked who the hell is Agnes because you hadn't seen the video that I did before the Seven Deadlies had launched. And I thought that I'd explained this before, but I realized that I've been promising the return of Agnes for so long that it's almost become like this. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a red herring. Because it hasn't happened, and everyone's like, what the hell is this Agnes thing? Like, it would be really funny if that went viral. I think it would be utterly hilarious. Like, start this big-ass campaign. We're like, who is Agnes? Evil face. But no. So I will give you the story. Even if I have done it before, I will do it again for those who don't know the story behind it. Okay. So, you have to understand that my best friend Scott and I are movie dorks. Especially really cheesy, really, really bad horror movies. And we have watched many of them. Scott and I became friends in middle school and kind of lost touch, but then picked up back again in high school, and we've been friends ever since I was in 10th grade and he was in 11th, so going on close to, God, like 13, 14 years, I want to say, whatever it's been since 97, when I graduated, plus some. So, God, close to 20, I guess, maybe. No, I'm not good at math. Anyway, so there's a few things that happened that led up to the birth of Agnes. Now, the first thing was we were working together at Sam Godia. We were doing inventory one night. And we were sitting out, I remember, in front of Annapolis Mall, sitting there smoking a cigarette, and we'd been on our feet all night because we worked an 8-hour shift, and then we did like 4 or 5 hours of inventory well until like 5, 6 in the morning. And so we're sitting there, and I'm, like, massaging my calves because they hurt so fucking much. And I just, at one point, I hit a nerve or something, and I was like, oh, my calves! And Scott just looked at me, and he's like, interesting, that sounded really bad. So file that in your memory for later in the story. The next part was there's this movie by Dario Argento, who, those of you may know, is my favorite suspense thriller movie director. He did Suspiria. He also did a movie called Phenomena. Now, for those of you who are not aware of this, Donald Pleasance, who played Dr. Loomis in Halloween, stars in Phenomena. Now, on the back of this movie, it talks about how there is this girl being chased by a serial killer for various reasons, and she goes to a wheelchair-bound doctor to aid her and learn about what she's experiencing. And I read the back, the night that Scott made me watch this movie for the first time, I read the back of this video so fast that the lines blurred together. So what I actually read in my mind and comprehended was, girl pursued by wheelchair-bound serial killer. Goldmine. You know, like, I instantly was like, oh my God, Scott, we need to make a movie about a wheelchair-bound serial killer. And thus, Oh My Calves was born. Oh My Calves is a horror movie that my best friend Scott and I want to make someday, which is going to be followed up by Oh My Calves 2, The Legacy, like L-E-G-G, you know, like legs, pantyhose. And it centers around this small town in Minnesota called Enuresis Falls, during which, back in the 50s, there was a beauty pageant, and young Enid Snodgrass, whose mother was a beauty contestant when she was in high school, wants her daughter to enroll in the annual Enuresis Falls beauty pageant. Unfortunately, this just so happens to be the year that they institute the swimsuit part of the competition, and Enid has extremely fat calves. Like, we're talking monstrous. Like, if she were walking down the street, you'd be like, Gaza! You know. So Enid ends up losing the beauty pageant because when it comes time for her to walk out on stage in the swimsuit, everyone laughs at her because her calves are so big. Her mother, who is very typical Carrie-esque, like, they're all gonna laugh at you, flips the fuck out, and things happen, and Enid ends up slicing up her calves with a razor blade and killing her mother. She goes apeshit crazy, but ends up getting shot, knocked out, or whatever, after killing a few people, and ends up in a coma, and she's locked away at the local, just conveniently local, insane asylum that sits up on, you know, the typical hill. And you flash forward 20, 30 years later, and Enid is still incapacitated in a coma, and in our ideal cast, it would be Ava Longoria and Wanda Sykes playing the nurses on staff. And things, you know, happen. Enid ends up waking up, and she ends up going on this murderous rampage throughout the town because it's the first year that they decided to bring back the beauty pageant. That's what brings her out of her coma, is she hears the nurse talking about the fact that the beauty pageant is back and her daughter's enrolled in it, blah, 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 blah. So crazy Enid in her coma wakes back up and goes on a killing spree to stop this from happening and get her revenge. In all of this, we drafted that, but what happened was we were actually on our way back from Atlanta. I'd gone to visit him, and I drove back up with him. And we were stuck in traffic in 95, and I just randomly looked at him, and I was like, oh my God, don't you know traffic is just so bad right now? And thus, a conversation began that lasted clear up from there until we got home, in which Scott and I created these two characters, Agnes Quimfucher and Maud Honeycunt. And we decided to transplant them into our movie because they had the Midwestern accent, and so thus they were born. Agnes and Maud are these two housewives that are completely clueless about everything, and throughout the movie, they show up, but they are completely oblivious to everything that's going on. And they will inadvertently run over Enid at some point during the movie, because, you know, they're driving up to the mansion where all the murders are happening because there's a slumber party and they're bringing, you know, drinks and supplies. And, you know, so they're just kind of sitting there in the car like, oh, yeah, you know, Hank said he's going to the Moose Lodge for the party tonight, but I don't know how that's going to go. And, oh, my God. Maud, what was that? You know, that kind of thing. Like, they run over the serial killer who was already bound in a wheelchair, but there's more to that, but I would sit here talking forever about the whole plot. But thus, Agnes and Maud were born. And the thing with Scott and I is we will sit there and we will drink and talk in character in various characters, and Agnes and Maud kind of became our staples. So when I started doing my own channel, I was trying to think of the various characters I could use to make spoof videos, funny videos, whatever, and Agnes was, of course, my first thing. I'm like, oh my God, bring Agnes to YouTube. This would be awesome. So that's where she came from. The thing is, though, is that she's a housewife. Hello. She's a housewife, so she doesn't have the red long hair and all of that stuff. Actually, that wig was by accident. That was all I had when I did it. Agnes is actually a Midwestern housewife who's probably in her late 50s to early 60s. So that is why when it's done again, I'm kind of deviating from the established canon of the story with them. Agnes, as she is incarnated on my YouTube channel, is going to be kind of separate from the true Agnes in the Oh My Cab series of thought. But yes, that is how she was born, that is where she came from, and look forward to it.